Welcome back to Weekends. And just before the break, I whet your appetite with this Iranian homosexual sex scandal amidst massive protests, and another breaking news story that we learned out here in Australia today, that the Australian government has paused aid to UNRWA, which is the UN organisation for Palestinian refugees, citing interference or involvement in the October 7 attacks. Barry, this is your specialty. What's going on here? I'm going to hand over to you for what technically is your report, because there is so much going on. What do you know?
Well, let's start with UNRWA. UNRWA is the biggest fraud ever perpetrated on world governments. It is the UN Works and Relief Agency that was established for one people only, Palestinian refugees, and they have perpetuated the victim status of refugees that are no longer refugees for 4 generations. UNRWA operates in Gaza, massive budgets paid for by all the Western countries. Israel has been saying for years, Jason, that UNRWA is supporting Hamas directly. And it turns out on the October 7th massacre, massive numbers of UNRWA employees paid for by the UN with your tax dollars and my tax dollars and European tax dollars participated in the massacres and the kidnapping of Israelis, and they were proud of it. As Israeli intelligence has been releasing the videos from the GoPro cameras, these guys videotapes rapes, brutality, murder, kidnapping, and broadcast it. Yay, look what I'm doing, I'm killing Jews. Well, those videos have come back to haunt them. And country after country after country is now cutting the budgets of UNRWA, including most European countries, the United States, UK, Australia, saying, we are not going to fund murderers anymore. The head of UNRWA came out today and said, quote, I am shocked that they're not going to fund us. Every single UNRWA facility in Gaza was a headquarters for tunnel entrances and exits, for bombs to be made, taken underground, brought up from underground, missiles to be fired, and prisoners to be transported. How do I know it? All the videos are available, several thousand of them, and I've been speaking to Israeli intelligence officers every single day. I've seen the videos. Every single facility in Gaza run by UNRWA covers up a terror operation. UNRWA knew about it, UNRWA funded it, UNRWA supported it, and UNRWA concealed it from the West. Why? Because they're all part of the same "we're going to destroy Israel" conspiracy, and it's no longer a conspiracy theory. It's just fact, Jason. It's just fact. One of the things I did want to talk about today is what happened at Auschwitz a couple days ago. We had International Holocaust Day yesterday. Elon Musk, maybe the most famous person in the world, went to Auschwitz with Ben Shapiro, a conservative commentator here in the U.S. He wore on his head a kippah, also called a yarmulke. He participated in the Jewish prayers at the death camp. He said he'll never forget it. He said what happened must stop, and the anti-Semitism on X has got to be throttled back. Now, this is a guy who's not Jewish. He now has dog tags that he says he will never take off, with names of hostages until the hostages are released. God bless Elon Musk. The amount of anti-Semitism he's taken in the last 24 hours is overwhelming. The world seems to have gone crazy and has forgotten the lessons of World War II, as if it never happened. So well done, Elon Musk. I'm very proud of him. But it's not just X that's fighting back. Sky News, which I know is a big deal in Australia, made an on-air apology today, one of their rare on-air apologies. You have a presenter there named Belle Donati. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She compared the Israeli war in Gaza to the Holocaust when she had the ambassador from Israel on her show. He was offended. I happen to know him personally. He's a wonderful gentleman. He said, how dare you besmirch the memory of the 6 million Jews that were murdered, many of them, over 1 million in Auschwitz. And Sky News came out with a apology today. They said they are sorry for what she said, and I've watched the apology twice. It wasn't a half apology, it was a full apology. And I can tell you from my perspective, as someone whose parents were in Auschwitz, whose uncles were there, my grandparents were there, my cousins were there, some of them are still there in the dirt in Auschwitz, Poland, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
They went up in smoke in the gas chambers. I'm very grateful for that. An interesting story that has to do with Israel, we should talk about it for a minute, is this crazy lunatic group called the Houthis. Here's an interesting dynamic in American politics. Donald Trump, rightly so, declared the Houthis a terror group worldwide, restricted their movements, their cash. They were banned from using the International Bank of Settlements. They couldn't trade. They were a persona non grata as a group. What did Joe Biden do when he took office? Took the designation off for no reason that made any sense. And the Houthis started accumulating massive amounts of missiles, drones, bombs, terror vests, all paid for by Iran, trained by Iran, and run by Iran. And as Iran's proxy army in the Middle East, what have they been doing? Bombing international shipping. Over 100 ships in the last 2 months have been attacked by either Houthi pirates, Houthi missiles, or Houthi drones. Ships are being hit like crazy. Over 100 ships are now being rerouted. There were 14 attacks just today on ships passing near Yemen, where the Houthis operate out of. And the United States and the UK are, well, they're doing some pinprick bombing and they don't want to start a war, God forbid. I have a question for you and your listeners. If the Houthis hit one Russian ship, one Chinese ship, just one, can you imagine what the Russians would do? Can you imagine what the Chinese would do? Within hours, dust.
Yes.
They would flatten everybody that had anything to do with it. What do? We knock down their missiles, the ships keep going. Look, I've been to sea with the US Navy several times. I've been on destroyers and I've been on the aircraft carriers. Those things carry so many weapons. Literally, a carrier group can wipe out half a continent. If Joe Biden had the stones, if you know what I mean, to act like a president to defend the world and our country, the Houthis would be already done. We see with the satellites exactly where they are. Look, the Israelis do it in Gaza. We know exactly where those missiles came from. The factories, the troops, the storage depots, and the launch sites would all be gone already if we had a president who led by example instead of, well, I don't know what you call it. I don't even know who's making the decisions, but it's not somebody who puts my country first, which I consider to be a big problem. I know we don't have much time. I do want to touch on the International Court of Justice.
Yes.
It's been very, very upsetting for any freedom-loving country, including yours. Thank you, Australia, for backing Israel and the UK and Germany and France and other countries like Hungary. The idiocy brought before the World Court by South Africa, which is a terribly oppressive regime where white farmers are being slaughtered daily, and that seems to be okay to South Africa. They took Israel before the World Court with charges of genocide. After hearing testimony for a number of days, the court finally came out and gave I would call a milquetoast response, which is, don't commit genocide and you can keep fighting in Gaza. I don't even know what that means because Israel's not committing genocide. I know troops in Gaza right now. I speak to them. They all carry a card that they are trained to follow, which are the rules of engagement. It's the only army in the world that gives instructions to their troops to protect civilians. Israel's death ratio of civilians to combatants is the lowest in world history. The American death rate was 9 civilians to 1 combatant in World War II. Israel is about 1.5 to 1. It is the most sane, safest war in history. And instead of getting commendations, Israel, because of anti-Semitism, gets attacked in front of the world court, which I consider a big, big problem. I know that there are rumors out tonight, my time, this morning, your time, that there might be another peace deal with Hamas. Hamas is insisting that the leaders, stay in power, which is insane. The top three guys in Hamas have stolen somewhere in the area of about $10 billion. They're richer than rich. I mean, they are astoundingly rich. Private jets, mansions all over the world, private bank accounts. They travel like sheiks while their people are starving to death. And they're demanding, as part of a peace treaty, they'll release the hostages that they took if Israel releases all the murderers that they've arrested over the last several decades and leaves Hamas in power. That will never happen. If Netanyahu was to agree to that, his government would collapse, and that would be the end of it. There would be no peace. I can tell you from people who have been there, I've been to Gaza, there's no way they can be allowed to retain any semblance of power. Gaza must be demilitarized. The entire Gaza Strip is an armed camp. It is the most armed small space in the history of the world. Watch the videos. The IDF puts them out every single day. And every day, they're rounding up more and more of these killers. Let them do their job, and then let there be peace. But if they don't, there'll be another massacre. And I can tell you, I have family living on the Gaza border that, but for they were off the kibbutz that day, would be in a grave, or worse, and I mean this, 60, 80 feet underground in Gaza City in a cage, because that's where Hamas is putting their prisoners.
You know, when we hear so much reporting, etc., of what's going on, and thank you for what you've just been able to describe, I can't help but think almost biblically, when the Jewish people in the Exodus leave Egypt and spend 40 years in the wilderness before it is that Moses, who leads them out of Egypt and then can't enter the promised land, and Joshua has to come in and take over. I almost feel like with Hamas, we're facing something similar, that the innocent Gazans, the Palestinians, have to separate themselves and somehow be in the wilderness for some period of time, and then re-emerge with a new way of being able to deal. But you have to cut the cancer out, and we've seen that now, the lack of elections, etc., that's gone on there, and this entrenched terrorist behaviour. It's unpleasant for on anyone who's supporting what's going on, and no one wants to see innocent people killed in any stretch of the imagination. It's the worst possible scenario, but at the same time, you have to deal with the threats that you are presented with, and that's why it's so difficult. We have unfortunately reached the end of the hour, Barry. I just want to say thank you again for making time for me today on my show here in Australia, that is obviously going around the world, but for the work that you're doing at AmericanTruthProject.org. And if you want to find a really easy way, just write findbarry.com into your internet browser, and that will take you straight through to Barry's site. Thank you once again, Barry. Really appreciate it. We have to go to the news headlines. Thank you.